What's going on, everyone? Welcome to the Tuesday, September 10th edition of the Ship My Money Show. I'm your host, Adam Scherer. You can follow me on Twitter at ShipMyMoney DFS. We have an 11-game MLB slate tonight. No weather concerns that we have to deal with. Some nice-sized tournaments as well. 50K up top in the $15 on DraftKings. 100K up top in the $111. So no NFL today, and we got some decent contests back. Really would be nice to take one of those down in time for NFL Week 2. So good luck to you guys. Hopefully I'll take the 100K. You guys can have whatever's left. But going to walk through what I'd be playing in the $15 50K to first on DraftKings if the slate started right now. Going to go position by position and talk through the stacks as well, as I typically do on this show. As a reminder, if I'm not getting to something, it doesn't mean they're a bad play. There's a million different ways that you can attack large field tournaments. The big thing is just putting competitive lineups together, giving yourself shots on goal, chances to win. There's a lot of different ways you can do that. It's not just generally one specific player or anything like that that makes or breaks the slate for you. So if there is somebody that you like that I'm not getting to, feel free to ask. Chances are, my opinion is going to be, yeah, you can make good lineups with that person too, but maybe there's a chance or there's a specific reason that I don't like them or I'm not getting to them. So feel free to ask and throw any other comments into chat as well. As always, also hit the thumbs up button, subscribe to the channel. That helps out a lot. Also benefits you right now because there is some additional content on this channel with NFL starting. I've been doing showdown shows as of yesterday. Did one yesterday morning for Monday Night Football Showdown with Neil Orfield. We're running it back on Thursday, doing that on Thursday morning. Davis Maddock has been on here off and on doing some stuff. I know him and Nerdy did a underdog draft show with a tool that Nerdy's working on the other day. So turn the notifications on. You'll get alerts when these shows go live, and they're kind of in flux, not always at the same time. So that will benefit you. So jumping in here, starting with the pitching, where I do know I am pretty heavily concentrated at the top today with Pablo Lopez, 9,100, taking on the Angels in Minnesota. Really good spot for Lopez. I'm not sure that I've gotten a good Pablo Lopez game yet this year. He is one of those pitchers where I look at his numbers for the season. He's been really, really good. 26% K percentage, 3.29 xFIP. And I have no idea when any of that happened because it feels like every time that I roster him, he sucks. But he has been good this year. He's been good for several years. And he has a really good matchup here against the Angels in Minnesota. So it's a park downgrade for the Angels hitters. Their active roster ranks 28th in WRC plus against right-handed pitching. They rank 9th in strikeout percentage. So Lopez sets up really nicely here. He is going to be popular, getting 43% ownership. But on an 11-game slate, I generally don't mind that because it's really, really easy to find low-owned stacks, low-owned hitters. Raw ownership numbers are just generally going to be lower because you have so many options to choose from. And then also on this slate, despite there being a lot of games, there's not a ton of good pitching. Pablo Lopez, his 26% strikeout percentage is the 5th highest of anybody pitching today, not even just limiting that, to this slate. And one of those pitchers that has a higher strikeout percentage is Yamamoto, who is limited, I assume, for the Dodgers tonight. So it just speaks to, even though there's 22 pitchers going, there's not a lot of pitching depth. So I am pretty happy to just get to Lopez, hope for the best. Like I was saying a minute ago, there are a million ways to play these large field tournaments. It doesn't mean you have to be jamming Pablo Lopez. If you tell me that you just don't want to play the 43% owned pitcher in a tournament with 15,000 entries or whatever it is, that's fine. If he pitches poorly, you're in really, really good shape. But for me, and in my process, the way things are grading out, it's easier for me, and I'm not having trouble finding good lineups that still have Pablo Lopez, even at that elevated ownership level. So he looks really good. Spencer Arrighetti, 45% of the lineups I built, 28% projected ownership, $8,400 price tag, good strikeout matchup against the A's. It is a dangerous matchup. This is a team that has obviously won people tournaments a lot this year. They rank 11th now in WRC plus against right-handed pitching, but they do also strike out a lot. 3rd highest K percentage against right-handed pitching. And Arrighetti's been very, very good so far in his rookie season. He has allowed some power, which is scary against this Oakland team, but he's also struck out 27.5% of the hitters that he has faced. So the upside is certainly there for him. 8,400, reasonable price tag. I wouldn't be mad if I'm getting some A's on the other side. I haven't looked at my stacks yet. It's a spot where I wouldn't be too upset if I'm kind of just getting both sides of it, but I do think Arrighetti looks very, very good here. Chris Bassett showing up 21% of the time, so pretty much 2x the field. Not a good matchup for him against the Mets. I do think this is probably an ownership play. I would assume that Bassett is typically showing up more often in or higher owned stacks, with more popular hitters because he is only getting 11% ownership. I don't love the matchup here. It is a park upgrade as far as power goes for the Mets as well. And Bassett has struggled a bit generally with left-handed bats. We do know that there is left-handed power in the Mets lineup. Overall this season, lefties only striking out 19.8% of the time, 218 expected ISO, 380 expected WOBA against Bassett. By comparison, sub 100 expected ISO, 25.7% K percentage, 268 expected WOBA for right-handed hitters against Bassett. So this is a spot where, I get it because Bassett overall is an okay pitcher and he's not that popular. And in the context of this slate, he's, a decent pitcher. But I don't like the matchup here. I don't have a lot that I can point to that makes me feel comfortable he's going to pitch well. It's more of a situation where, if he does pitch well, then you're in pretty good shape. But, you look at this Mets lineup too. Francisco Lindor leading off, Jesse Winker hitting second. Then you get a couple of righties with Vientos and Alonso. Brandon Nimmo hitting fifth, a righty in JD Martinez, DJ Stewart batting seventh. So it's, they have good lefties in this lineup. It's absolutely a dangerous matchup here for Bassett. I don't have a lot of confidence in it, but I don't really think I'm going to have confidence in most of the low-owned pitchers today, because if there was reason to have confidence, they wouldn't be low-owned because we do not have an abundance of pitching on this slate. So that's kind of how I view that. Aaron Savali, I'm pretty close to the field. He's very, very cheap at 6,300. He gets a park upgrade going into San Francisco. This Giants team does strike out as well. They're seventh in strikeout percentage against right-handed pitching this year, only a 98 WRC+. Savali overall this season striking out 22% of hitters, 4.25 xFIP. In the context of this slate, that is not a $6,300 pitcher. And then Cho Coldham just mentioned it in chat too. It is cold in San Francisco. You are getting cool weather there, so it's a difficult place to hit home runs anyway. It becomes even more difficult when the weather is in the 50s like it is tonight. So another reason to like Savali. Looks like a good value play. Zach Gallen, I'm a little below the field, but pretty close at 8,600 going up against the Rangers. Difficult strikeout matchup. This Texas roster ranks 23rd in K percentage against right-handed pitching. They do only have a 91 WRC plus though. Zach Gallen, 23.5% strikeout percentage this year, 3.77 xFIP. Just a solid pitcher. It is also a park downgrade for the Rangers as far as home runs go. Globe Life, or whatever it is now, is a very favorable place to hit home runs. Arizona, Chase Field is not. I did bet the over. I think it was 5.5 strikeouts on Zach Gallen earlier today as well. I don't know what that line is now. I posted that this morning for subscribers to my Dub Club and the End Game. But I did have the over on his strikeouts this morning. So hopefully he pitches well, but also hopefully he doesn't pitch well enough that it hurts that I only have him in 13% of DFS lineups, I guess. Griffin Canning not getting any ownership. There's a drop-off for me too in terms of my exposure. So you can see that I kind of have this top tier here with Lopez and Arrighetti, and then a mid tier with Bassett, Savali, Gallen, and then it drops off. Griffin Canning, 5K going up against the Twins rather. It is a park upgrade for him. It is not a good matchup for him. The Twins offense in general is difficult to strike out, but he's 5K. And I've said this a million times on shows this year, shows in the past. If you've ever watched me talk about starting pitching, any fully stretched out major league level starting pitcher, which Griffin Canning is underpriced if he's $5,000. DraftKings should just have like a floor of 6K or 6,500 on starting pitchers that are not limited. And so you're getting value on Canning. He's still pretty likely to suck and you not really realize that value, but there is value there. And I do like that he's just not getting any ownership either. It would be very, very different if the field were projected to just be saying, hey, pitching on this slate is pretty weak. Let me play 5K Griffin Canning and hope for the best. Because in that case, I would just play anything else and hope that Griffin Canning does what Griffin Canning normally does. But him not getting the ownership and him at that price tag. Also, he is still a somewhat intriguing pitcher. He's been very bad overall this year. 17% K percentage, 4.84 xFIP, 5.23 FIP. But this is somebody that in previous seasons has struck out, 22, 23, 24% of hitters. We're in the middle of September now. I don't think that is necessarily going to suddenly emerge for him but it's in there somewhere in theory at least. So at no ownership and at 5K, I understand why I'm getting a little bit of him, but obviously I'm not going crazy with it. I don't have a lot of confidence in it. Um, George Kirby, 10% owned. I'm getting about half of that. Very, very difficult strikeout matchup against the Padres. Kirby is a good pitcher. This park is horrible for offense. This park is very, very good for getting strikeouts. That being said, San Diego's active roster has a 17% K percentage against right-handed pitching this season. The next lowest is Houston at 18.5% and Cleveland at 18.5%. So it's not even close from 30th to 29th, really. And the Padres also have a 118 WRC plus. George Kirby, good pitcher overall, 23.5% K percentage. He's only walked 3% of hitters this year, 3.56 xFIP, but he is getting 10% ownership. He's 8,800. I think he's kind of comparable to Bassett to me, but he's a little bit more expensive. In my head, I really wouldn't be upset if, like, instead of 20% Bassett and 4% Kirby, I just had 12% a piece. But also, I don't like the spot for Kirby. If you're going there, it is because of the park and because of the talent level that Kirby has. But it is a really brutal matchup going up against the Padres. Cutter Crawford, another tough matchup against the O's. This game is in Fenway Park as well, so very good park for offense. The Orioles have been struggling offensively lately, and by lately, I mean really for probably like 2 months, but they still have talent in that lineup. Overall, they have guys that are difficult to strike out, but because of injuries, there are more strikeouts than usual, and this particular lineup has a lot of them at the bottom. Kobe Mayo is hitting 7th. Jackson Holliday is hitting 8th. James McCann is hitting 9th. I'm kind of making this point in a weird way because I'm below the field right now on Crawford. But if you are looking to play Crawford or you're interested in Crawford, I do like this strikeout matchup against the Orioles more than usual because of the bottom of this order. Kobe Mayo strikes out a lot. Jackson Holliday strikes out a lot. James McCann is not playing Major League Baseball for his offensive abilities, and he will strike out. So I do like it's as good as a good of a matchup against the Orioles as you're going to get. Crawford is a decent strikeout pitcher as well. 22.5% K percentage, 4.43 xFIP, 1.6 home runs per 9. Those are the scary numbers here because you do still have power in this Orioles lineup. Mayo and Holiday, I mentioned their strikeouts. They both have power. Henderson obviously has power. Santander, O'Hearn, Rutschman, Kowser, these guys can all do damage. And so it's still not a safe spot for Crawford, but it is a better spot than earlier in the season when you just had this Orioles lineup really top to bottom that just didn't strike out much. They have so many injuries now that they have guys called up that aren't quite ready. Kobe Mayo, Jackson Holliday, probably not exactly ready for the major leagues. At best, they have power, but also strike out a lot. So that does make him look a little bit better. Seth Lugo, somebody I just generally don't get to all that much. His salary did come down. He's only 8,200, but he has a really tough matchup against the Yankees in Yankee Stadium. So I'm still not likely to get too much Seth Lugo. Marcus Stroman, Yu Darvish rounding things out here. It is a good strikeout matchup for Darvish. He's projected for like 12% ownership right now. I'm not getting to that. In his last start, which was September 4th, he threw 63 pitches. That was his first start back from the injured list. He hadn't pitched since May 29th in the major leagues. And if I remember correctly, he had not had a rehab start. He had he didn't have a rehab start. He had like a bullpen session, simulated game, whatever you want to call it. He only went 2 2/3. They pulled him at 63 pitches. He wasn't pitching particularly well. He had given up 3 earned runs against the Tigers in that start. He did strike out 4 guys, but I am somewhat worried about him having a limited pitch count here. I think he probably throws more pitches than last time, can probably get you to like 80, 85 pitches. But at the same time, I thought that was the case last time because he had thrown 60 something pitches in his simulated game. So if the Padres are being overly cautious with him, that would be a concern. But then the other concern is that he's not exactly cheap. He's $8,300. And if he throws 80 to 85 pitches, yeah, it is in his range of outcomes against the Mariners that he's just really efficient and racks up like 7 or 8 strikeouts anyway. But assuming he's somewhat limited here, you do have to question, what the right-hand side of his fantasy point distribution looks like and how likely is it that if you don't play Yu Darvish, you can really get in trouble. Whereas, obviously, if you do play him, he can pitch poorly and you wish you didn't have him. So I think that's kind of the issue for me here is that he is getting some ownership and it doesn't really seem like the reward outweighs the risk. That being said, I'm playing Chris Bassett, and I would much rather be playing Yu Darvish. So, um, just from a matchup standpoint. So I wouldn't fault anybody for going to Darvish in that park, but I think that is the reason that he's not showing up a ton for me right now. Scrolling back to the top, because I know there were some questions at the top that I missed. Madden Dispute said, getting some Oakland stacks with the adjustments I made. Are you getting to any of them? Not sure. I haven't looked yet, but before I even look, and I kind of mentioned it when I was talking about Arrighetti, I do think they make sense in large field tournaments because Arrighetti's going to be rostered by 25 to 30% of the field. He has given up power. Houston's not a great park for home runs, but it's not like the A's play their home games in good parks for home runs anyway. So you have a high upside offense against a pitcher that struggles with power, and you're getting negative correlation. Whether or not I have them, I do think they are a good tournament stack. Cam said, usually when the slate doesn't have a standout offense, I play low-owned Dodgers or Yankees. Thoughts on Yankees tonight? Lugo's had a few rough starts in their second half. Yeah, that's a perfectly fine approach. The only thing to keep in mind is salaries, but pitching on this slate, you don't really have a ton that you are truly paying up for. Like even if you were to go Lopez plus Kirby or something, you're paying $18K at pitcher, give or take. So that's not as much of a concern. But yeah, going to when every offense is in a mediocre spot, going to the most talented offenses is generally a pretty good approach. Lugo is a good pitcher, but you just have so much power upside in Yankee Stadium for the Yankees that I have no issue with that. Again, I don't know if I'm getting them or not. I'll find out when you do in a second. But whether or not I'm getting to them, I certainly wouldn't tell you the Yankees in Yankee Stadium here are a bad play, especially on a slate where a lot of the offenses do look pretty flat, pretty similar. Eddie Nally said I'm getting a lot of Twins. Yeah, they're facing Griffin Canning. That sounds pretty good. Jake said don't mind 2 to 3 Angels bats. I've gotten Lopez wrong every single start this year. I don't know when people got Lopez right. I really don't know when the good starts were. Nuke DFS said, why didn't you play Dobbins? Actually, I'm in the middle. I've been up all day working on taking notes from week one. And I'll eventually post that for subscribers. But actually going through that, obviously Dobbins had a really good game. I'm pretty sure if you told me exactly how many touches, how involved Dobbins was, I still wouldn't have played Dobbins even in hindsight. Obviously, if I knew that he turned 10 carries and 135 yards, I'd play him. But yeah, he's one of the week one kind of victory laps that I'm seeing from people that I think if you told them exactly how involved he'd be, they would have said, never mind, I'm not playing him. So plenty of guys that I didn't play or did play and did poorly. But yeah, I don't regret not having Dobbins at all. Jonathan said, you helped me huge last time I played baseball DFS. Angels Texas stack turned $5.80. Thank you. Yeah, that's awesome. I think I remember you mentioning that before, but yeah, big win, great ROI. Hopefully you can run it back, do it again tonight. Savali plus Lively builds. Yeah, I mean, I guess Lively should be getting ownership, I would think. 11% ownership at 7,300. I only got 2%. He's facing the White Sox, so yeah, he's fine. We saw it yesterday where I got burned because I didn't play much Cantillo. Just went out there, absolutely dominated. Best start he's had in the majors by far. The White Sox, obviously, you can pick on them pretty much at will. I'm a little surprised he's actually only getting 11% ownership at 7,300, but it's not like he's a good strikeout pitcher, only striking out 19% of hitters this year, 4.58 xFIP. The White Sox also only a middle of the road strikeout matchup. They are an awful offense overall, 79 WRC plus. But yeah, no issues getting him. You can also, if you're going Savali Lively, like you said, you can get to whatever bats you want as well. Talked about Canning. Choke Hold'em's getting to a lot of Milwaukee. That's not a park that I really want to be going to. Hopefully in a second when I flip over, I'm not with you there. So looks like I'm caught up on everything. Moving over to top stacks, put the fork down, said no love for Houston. I don't know, haven't gotten offenses, but okay. So whoever had Oakland, I'm right there with you. And I am also getting some Houston as well. But Oakland is showing up for me a ton in all stack types, in 5-mans, in 4-mans. So this very much looks like a slate where if I were playing 150 lineups right now, I would be either playing Arrighetti or playing Oakland. And I think, for people that are watching that do play single entry, do play 3-max, I think you can take either side and they're both fine. The point being that you can find a lot of very good lineups that you expect to be profitable that have Arrighetti, and you can find a lot of lineups that you expect to be profitable that are stacking Oakland. It is a situation where there's certainly a middle ground where neither side does great, but I do like targeting spots like this where it's a pitcher that gets a lot of strikeouts and also gives up a lot of home runs against an offense that strikes out a lot and hits for power, because it does just increase the chances of some side of it having a ceiling game, for lack of a better phrase, and also when it's reasonably priced. Arrigetti's not expensive at all at 8,400. The A's bats sort by exposure here, but generally not expensive. You have Langoliers at 4,200. Jacob Wilson, obviously not exciting, but he's leading off 2,500. Not a lot of power, but puts the ball in play. Not bad for a $2,500 leadoff hitter. Zach Geloff has speed and some power, so they're really, really cheap. And so what's happening there is not only are you getting all the things that I mentioned before, where the A's have power and they're facing a popular pitcher, so if they hit home runs, they do well. You're knocking off 25 to 30% of the field that has Arrigetti. But what's also happening is that the rest of your lineup is just going to be the best plays that you can get to because they are so cheap. So let's say you have a 5-man Oakland stack. The hard part, obviously, is them doing well. But if they do well, you're just going to have the best pitching around them. You're going to have the best one-offs around them. Their lack of ownership makes it so you don't have to worry about ownership really in the rest of your lineup. You can just play whoever has the highest ceiling, whoever projects the best. You can get to the best one-offs. You can get to the best secondary stacks. You can get to the best pitching other than Arrigetti. So it is a really, really powerful stack to get to. Obviously, it's going to fail a lot, but so is any given stack. But it is really, really easy, I think, conceptually to see why Oakland would be showing up as a stack that can make you a lot of money in tournaments tonight. So I do just like kind of being very, very heavily on both sides of that. Cleveland coming in 31% of the time. Good matchup for them going up against Jonathan Cannon. He has been solid against right-handed hitters so far this season, and that is something that I expect to continue at least to some extent, just because of the way that he pitches. Relies heavily on his sinker, relies on getting a lot of ground balls. Pitchers with that profile generally struggle pretty hard against opposite-handed hitters, and that's what we've seen so far from Cannon. The reason being that he doesn't get a lot of swings and misses, and the pitch that he relies on the most, or at least his best pitch, like he has a changeup he throws a lot to left-handed hitters. It's just not a great pitch. The pitch that he relies on the most, it's running in on the hands of right-handed hitters. It's running right to the barrel, right to the sweet spot on left-handed hitters, right into their swing path, basically, for most left-handed hitters. So it sets up really, really good for left-handed power bats. And this Cleveland team is running out a lot of lefties. Steven Kwan leading off, Jimenez hitting second, Jose Ramirez, switch hitter, hitting third, Josh Naylor, bunch of power, hitting fourth. He's only 4,500 too. That's a price tag that's dropped a lot over the last month or so. Lane Thomas from the right side hitting fifth. He's, whatever. He's right-handed. He's 4K. Kyle Manzardo, back from AAA, highly regarded pitching prospect, or not pitching prospect. They got him for a pitching prospect. I don't remember who. Or they got him for a pitcher. I don't remember who. Might have been Savali, actually. But 2,800, has power. He looks good. Noel, right-handed, has power, whatever. I do like him just because Cannon doesn't get a lot of swings and misses. So that is a pitcher that I would rather take Noel against guys that don't get swings and misses than guys that do. But, he is right-handed, so he's not as appealing as some of these lefties. Bo Naylor, left-handed catcher that has some power upside. You don't have Fry in this lineup either, so you don't run into the issue with Cleveland stacks that we did yesterday, where you have to choose between one of the catchers. They both ended up doing well yesterday, so it didn't matter too much. But that just makes it a little bit easier to stack as well. So the Guardians look really, really good. Minnesota showing up third for me. Houston a bit behind them. Somebody had asked about Minnesota earlier, and yeah, I do think they look good against Canning. I said I was getting to a little bit of Canning, but overall this season, 186 expected ISO to lefties for Canning, 177 to righties. The Twins do have pretty cheap power in this lineup. Matt Wallner hitting second, 3,900. This is somebody that's done a lot of damage against right-handed pitching. He hits the ball really hard. 380 plate appearances against righties, 290 expected ISO going back to the start of last season. Edward Julian's leading off, 600 plate appearances against right-handed pitching since the start of last year, 202 expected ISO. That is a lot of power upside for a sub 3K second baseman. It's not like this is a deep position usually. You're not sacrificing a lot of upside if you pay down. And if you pay down for Julian, you're not even really sacrificing upside because he can hit 4 power. So I really like that those two are hitting at the top of the order. Jose Miranda DHing righty, but Canning still gives up some power there at 4,100. Then you get another power lefty with Larnach. Carlos Santana, not a ton of power, but he's cheap batting fifth. Ryan Jeffers has power for a catcher. Brooks Lee is a highly regarded hitting prospect batting seventh. So it's a really cheap stack. It fills the same thing that I was talking about with Oakland too, where if the Twins come through, not only are you in a good situation because you have an offense that's doing well, but you're in a good situation because the rest of your lineup is just going to look so good. Whereas, if you stack a team, just using the Yankees and Dodgers as an example, because it was mentioned earlier, but let's say you go with the expensive versions of those stacks and, your team has Freeman, Betts, Ohtani, Will Smith, and they come through, great. Like that's obviously good for your stack, but then you're going to be looking at a bunch of, $3K, $3,200 guys and just like praying they somehow hit a home run and a double. Whereas the Twins come through or the Athletics come through, and you're just looking at a team full of guys that are fully capable of hitting 2 home runs in a game or something like that. So the difference in upside for the rest of your lineup is also, I think, what is going to push up a team like Minnesota. Middle of the road here for Houston, Baltimore, St. Louis, Arizona. I mentioned the home run issues for Cutter Crawford earlier, and Baltimore does have power in this park, so perfectly fine getting to them. Also, a benefit, I guess, of Baltimore being hurt is that it does make that lineup a little bit cheaper. The top of it is still very expensive. Gunnar is 6,400. Mullins got a lineup bump. He's sitting second at 4,600. Santander is 5,800. Ryan O'Hearn at some point jumped to 4,900. I don't know when that happened, but he'd been cheap for most of the season. So he's expensive. Kowser's over 5K. Rutschman's over 5K. If you just stack, any part of 1 through 6, it's probably going to leave you with pretty unappealing either pitching or one-offs or both. But if you mix in $2,500 Kobe Mayo or $4,400 Jackson Holiday, who's still relatively expensive, you are still getting some power upside there at least somewhat less of a cost. So they are pretty expensive overall as a stack, but you can use the bottom of the order to make them at least a little bit cheaper, still get some upside in this park. St. Louis taking on the Reds in St. Louis, not a park that I love taking hitters in, especially this time of year. It plays a lot better in the summer when it's hot and humid, but you do have Rhett Lauder, young, unproven major league pitcher. He's thrown a total of like 160 pitches in the majors, pitched for Wake Forest in the College World Series last year, if I remember correctly, against Skeens. He's been solid, through his first couple major league starts, but you do have power upside on the Cardinals. You are, facing a pitcher that has a lot of volatility just because we don't know what he is at the major league level. So 20.5% K percentage through his first couple of starts. He struck out 33%, but that was only one start at AAA. So he's made 3 total appearances above the AA level. Just points to, your guess is as good as mine, kind of if he's ready for the major leagues. He projects for like an 18 to 20% K percentage rest of season, 4.5 FIP, but there is certainly a very wide range of outcomes for him at this point. And you do have a lot of power for the Cardinals, even though they have, kind of been a disappointing offense at times this year. They are also affordable. Alec Burleson, 4,100 batting second, is the only guy on DraftKings that is priced above 4K for the Cards. Goldschmidt sub 4K, Arenado sub 4K, Donovan leading off at 3,500. Jordan Walker's in there with power at 3,300. So they are cheap. So they also fit that same thing that I was talking about with Minnesota, with Oakland. Arizona going up against the Rangers, another just good offense that I never am going to be upset about getting to. It is a tough matchup against Nathan Eovaldi, so I assume that they're going to be pretty low owned. Eovaldi doesn't give up a ton of power. 167 expected ISO to lefties is better than 109 expected ISO to righties, but it's not a ton of power to either side. But the Diamondbacks do have stolen base upside. They have power hitters, even if it's not the best matchup against Eovaldi. So there is upside for this team. Eovaldi is also historically not very good at preventing stolen bases. So that is one thing to like a little bit about Arizona. We don't have their lineup yet, but Corbin Carroll should be running here. Jake McCarthy should be running here. Ketel Marte maybe. But he's also just been one of the best hitters in baseball this year. He's expensive, but at second base. So I like the upside from the Diamondbacks, even though I don't like the matchup. They're just a team where their median outcome isn't great in this spot. But when you think about the full distribution, the range of outcomes, what it looks like when they do well, it's pretty appealing just given the stolen base and power upside that they have. Beyond them, sub 10%, kind of just mixing in most other teams to some extent. If we look at 5-man stacks, Oakland, Cleveland, Oakland really at the top, then Cleveland. Pretty spread out on the 5-mans. So a lot of the other stuff is probably 2-mans, being mixed in. A lot of Minnesota 2-mans, Houston 2-mans. So pretty wide open offensive slate. Oakland seems like the team I'm really prioritizing along with Cleveland. And then I'm just kind of mixing and matching a lot of other teams. Going to go position by position now. And obviously, for the most part, it's just going to be the stacks that I just told you that I have. But Shea Langoliers at the top, projected for 4% ownership. Maybe this ownership number does come up. I do think that's something that I'll probably adjust a bit between now and lock. Whenever I get a stack that looks like this on this show, I get a little bit nervous that they may just be under projected ownership wise. And if I were to bump Langoliers from say like 4% to 8%, it's not going to make me not play Langoliers, but it'll pull him from 31% to like 20% probably or something. And that'll be the case for all of these Oakland guys. And the reason that I think it's concerning is just such a large percentage of DFS players now, particularly guys that are playing the most entries in tournaments, have a similar process to me. Obviously not exactly the same, not necessarily using the exact same tools, but a similar process that involves trying to exploit the field. And so if ownership projections are telling you that the field is going to have 4 or 5% of these guys, and then you make all of these decisions based on that information, and a relatively large percentage of DFS players are doing the same thing with the same information, what ends up happening is that 4 or 5% owned guy ends up being 8 or 9% owned because everybody just did the same thing. So I do think there's a chance that they end up a little bit more popular than it's showing up right now. But even once I adjust for that, I'll still be getting to Oakland a good amount, I would think. Bo Naylor, good spot. Batting 8th isn't ideal, but 3,100 has power upside against Cannon. And then just very, very flat at catcher. I would assume that most of this is just the catcher in whatever stack that I'm getting to. Will Smith, Cal Raleigh, Ryan Jeffers. Those guys all have a lot of power. Clearly going to be happy getting to any of them. The field is getting to Jeffers and Naylor the most. I'm right now slightly over on Naylor, slightly under on Jeffers, but I think they both make a lot of sense. I think they're both good plays. At first base, I am apparently not getting to Jose Miranda, even though I'm getting to the Twins. That's weird. Josh Naylor showing up a lot for me. Happy with that. 25% of my lineups. Field's at 14%. Ton of power upside against Jonathan Cannon. I really, really like the spot for Josh Naylor. Carlos Santana going up against Canning, perfectly fine. Seth Brown against Arrighetti, I like that one. 9% at first base, probably have more in the outfield, I would assume. So that looks pretty good to me. Paul Goldschmidt, obviously, if I'm going to be stacking the card some, I want to get the Goldschmidt. He's one of the highest upside guys in that lineup. But then pretty flat throughout the rest of the first base. I thought maybe I'd have some more Kyle Manzardo at 4%, but it looks like basically the field is playing projected to play 9 to 10% Manzardo, and then like 14% Naylor at first base. I think for me, what's happening is basically that Naylor's salary relative to Manzardo just isn't making enough of a difference. And so I'm preferring to just play more Naylor at the expense of Manzardo, where the field is treating them pretty similarly. I'm just not having trouble finding that $1,700 or whatever it is difference in their price tags. And I'm able to build lineups that are still very high upside while getting to Naylor, who at this point in their respective careers is a better hitter than Manzardo. So like if Naylor were projected for 20% ownership and Manzardo were down at 5, I'd probably be playing a lot more Manzardo. But because they're so close together and it's not really detrimental to my lineups to find that salary for Naylor, even though his raw ownership is a little bit higher, he's also the better hitter and more likely to succeed than Manzardo. So I'm just getting to him a bit more. Vlad Guerrero, obviously, tons of power upside if you can get to him. For the field, they're getting to Naylor a lot. They're getting to Miranda a lot, like I said. I don't know why I don't have any of him. Maybe I have him at third base. I don't know. That would make some sense since I do want to play Naylor and there are first basemen I like. Otherwise, maybe he wasn't in my projected lineup and I didn't catch it. But if I'm stacking the Twins, I would ideally be playing Miranda. I guess the other thing potentially is I did have a lot of like 2-man Twin stacks. So maybe and I was a little low on Jeffers too. So like maybe my Twin stacks are predominantly like Larnach plus Wallner, Julian plus Wallner, or something like that. That would also potentially make sense. The field's getting to Santana a bit, getting to Manzardo, getting to Perez. I don't really have Perez here. Not really getting to him, which he's another very good example of. If you tell me you want to play Salvador Perez in Yankee Stadium, great. Marcus Stroman's not having a particularly good year. 181 expected ISO to right-handed hitters. yeah, I don't have any problem at all with Salvador Perez. He just happens to not really be in the lineups that I built for this show. There's a lot of ways you could go, obviously. Second base, Jimenez showing up a lot, Geloff showing up a lot. Very happy with both of those. Again, just no ownership projected to Zach Geloff. Even if I turn this from 2.5% to 5%, he's going to look good for me. He has enough power to be interesting at that price tag. He has stolen base upside. Jimenez, good matchup against Cannon. So of the popular teams, you can see that Cleveland is the one that I'm prioritizing the most. I'm offsetting that with A's exposure. I'm offsetting that with some other lower owned teams. Edward Julian, I like a lot. Basically dead even with the field right now. I already talked about why I like him, though. He's just too cheap to be batting leadoff with the power upside that he has. Brendan Donovan, a little bit over the field there. Another just good value option at second base. So you can see that predominantly I am paying down at the second base position. 4,200 for Jimenez, not that expensive. Even cheaper for my other top four guys. Then we get a little bit of Ketel Marte. 2x the field. It doesn't take much to be above him. That was my guess when I saw that I was getting Arizona stacks, was that they weren't going to be very popular. So it doesn't take a lot of Arizona. You don't have to have your whole night revolving around this team facing Nathan Eovaldi to still be above the field and put yourself in a position where if they do well, you are in a pretty good spot. Jose Altuve against JP Sears in Houston, relatively expensive, but it's Jose Altuve. I don't think I really need to say a lot there. He clearly is a good play. Gleyber Torres against Lugo, batting leadoff, 3,900. Again, not a great matchup, but he's 3,900 leading off in Yankee Stadium. So I am getting to popular second baseman here at the top, Jimenez, Julian, Donovan. Then it kind of falls off of a cliff with like the second tier of second base ownership with Farmer, Alvarez, Turang, India, Lee. So kind of interesting for me at second base, but I do like the guys that I am getting to. I'm very happy with that. Jose Miranda showing up 5% for me at third base. So I do have him some, but well under the field. Again, just makes me think that I'm probably prioritizing the lefties, Julian, Wallner, Larnach, hopefully. So perfectly fine with that. Jose Ramirez, again, popular. I'm getting a lot of him. You don't have to fade every popular good player. I really like Jose Ramirez for any reason you can name. Steals bases, hits home runs, in a good spot, switch hits, so you always have to be platoon advantage. Everything for him looks good. Max Schumann hitting eighth, not getting any ownership, punting third base. I would assume mostly in A stacks. If I click, so I have 18 total lineups with Max Schumann. Of those, 18 of them are Oakland stacks, 14 of them are 5-man, one is a 4-man. So 15 of the 18 Max Schumann lineups have at least 4 athletics in them. And that is exactly what I would want, because basically Max Schumann is not the type of player that I want to be using a lot of as a one-off when he's hitting eighth. He has some power, but he's not a really volatile player. He's not somebody that is generally hitting a lot of home runs, stealing a lot of bases. Those are the guys that usually you're going to want as your one-offs, is those guys that have volatility and that can really get things done outside of their whole team doing well. And then somebody like Schumann, basically at 2,500, he's not a great play because of all the reasons I just said individually. But when you're stacking a team, if you're looking at a lineup and you have an Oakland stack, within that lineup, you're just saying, okay, well, what if Oakland does well? Because if Oakland doesn't do well, that lineup sucks anyway, so who cares? And if Oakland does well, then you have this $2,500 guy whose projection is just automatically higher because of how correlation works. If you knew ahead of time that Oakland scores 8 runs, then Max Schumann's projection goes from like 5.4 to 7.4, something like that. And you're taking all that positive correlation that comes with the teammates. So pretty much exclusively in Oakland stacks, almost exclusively in 4 or 5-man Oakland stacks, which is exactly what I would want. Nolan Arenado, 2x the field. Again, 3,900. Not a great spot overall. That park isn't great for power, but it is still Nolan Arenado against a dude that has made 3 appearances above the AA level at $3,900. Say what you want about where Arenado's at in his career. I still like the way that sounds. Getting to Alvarez. So this is somebody I wasn't getting to at first base. I am playing him a bit at second base. Or no, there was somebody else I wasn't getting to. Never mind. I am getting to a bit of Alvarez here. I wasn't getting to at first base, but it's not the popular guy I was thinking of. Getting to him at third base just because the opportunity cost isn't quite as high at third base. Same kind of thing with him as I was talking about with Schumann. I would prefer and hope that he is primarily in Oakland stacks, and he is. 100% of my Alvarez lineups have at least one other Oakland bat. So makes sense. Somebody had asked, I lost it. I don't know where it went. Somebody asked which Oakland guys that I was stacking or they should stack. If I'm playing 150 lineups and I'm playing a lot of Oakland, in some way stacking all of them, as you can see. But I think the guys that you're really prioritizing are just the best Oakland hitters. Shea Langoliers, the highest upside guys. Langoliers, the outfielders, Geloff. Obviously, I haven't gotten to the outfield yet, but I would hope that I'm getting to those guys. Jack Wilson, I mentioned earlier, but shortstop leading off at 2,500. Not a power hitter, but he is really cheap leading off. But you have Rooker in the lineup. You have Bleday in the lineup. I would hope that when I get to the outfield, they are both in there. Pretty spread out with the rest of my third base exposures. Daniel Schneemann is getting a ton of ownership. I don't think he's in the actual lineup. I didn't have the Cleveland lineup when I ran everything. So yeah, he's not in the actual lineup, so you can kind of disregard that. Obviously, that ownership will get redistributed other places. That lineup came out as I was running stuff, I think. So ignore him. But Ramirez is going to get a lot of ownership. I'm fine with that. I'm not getting to as much of the field on the rest of these kind of popular third basemen. So don't mind it. I'm pretty happy with the way that my third base exposures look. A lot of Jacob Wilson here at shortstop. Again, like I was saying with the other Oakland guys, that ownership percent or exposure percentage rather probably does come down a little bit once I adjust for how I think the field is going to adjust essentially. But it's still just a good value bat leading off. And, again, not the type of guy that I would want a ton of as a one-off, but absolutely somebody that I want in my Oakland stacks. Like, why not? He's cheap. He's going to just make it that much easier for me to get good hitters around them. So 97.7% of my Oakland teams or of my Wilson teams have at least one other Oakland player. 18 to 19% are four-mans, 42% are five-mans. So still predominantly in stacks there, which is exactly what I would want. Gunnar Henderson is like the type of guy where clearly if I'm stacking the Orioles, I want him in those stacks. But even if I'm not stacking the Orioles, I'll take Gunnar Henderson. Like he's not as reliant on his team doing well because he's the driving force of that offense in so many situations. He's stealing bases, he's hitting home runs. He's not relying on the guys around him to do a whole lot necessarily. So that's the type of, obviously different price point, but guys like that are the ones where I don't care if they're a one-off. I don't care if they're in stacks. Guys like Jacob Wilson, he's probably not winning you a tournament just because of what he does on his own, but he is going to benefit if all the guys around him do well. Also, Tommy Edman, I'm pretty much around the field here at shortstop. Maybe have a little bit more in the outfield. Just a pretty good price tag on him. Good park in Dodger Stadium. Not a good matchup going up against Imanaga. I know somebody had asked about him earlier. I think Imanaga against Yamamoto in Dodger Stadium. I wasn't getting really to either one as a pitcher. I'm assuming Yamamoto is going to be limited. He threw 53 pitches in his rehab start. He's 9,500. I can't bring myself to get to him. Imanaga is obviously good, but he is pitching in Dodger Stadium against the Dodgers. I don't really have it. If you wanted to go there just from a talent standpoint, obviously that's fine, but not the approach that I'm taking. Francisco Lindor, I'm actually pretty close to the field on him, which I am happy about because, like I was saying when I talked about Chris Bassett, I do really like the matchup here for the Mets lefties, Lindor being one of the best of them. So cool with him wherever I can get him. Willy Adames, not a good park, as we talked about, but he does give you some power and stolen base upside. Not going crazy in how much I'm getting to, but decent price tag there going up against Landon Root, who somebody I think had asked about earlier, and I'd actually been in the process of pulling that up and then pulled up somebody else instead. But he has made 19 total appearances with the Giants this year, 6 starts at AAA. All 19 of his major league appearances were out of the bullpen. Don't love the matchup against Milwaukee. He went 4 innings last time out. He threw 61 pitches. I do think that he is stretched out enough where he's an okay value at 4K. I don't think that I really need it all that much on this slate just because there's not like top tier pitching I need to pay for, but also I like so many of these cheap stacks. So like you can see here, I have him projected for a little over 11 DraftKings points at 4K on a lot of slates. That would actually get him into lineups if there were a ton of expensive bats I wanted to get to, or if there were like expensive bats and a $10,500 pitcher I wanted. But today it's just so easy for me to make what I think are high upside quality lineups that don't need to pay down for him. That he's still just not really showing up for me. But That being said, if you're looking at a lineup and like the reason you're asking about him is that you have this lineup in front of you where you love everything about it and you have like $4,200 left over for an SP2, by all means throw him in that lineup. He's just not somebody that I think has a big role overall for me on the slate, especially when it is good pitching conditions, it is a good park, but it's not a great matchup against Milwaukee overall. So now wrapping things up, I think I was in the outfield, and then I'll get back to the questions that I haven't gotten to yet. Not very good still at talking and reading stuff off of two different screens. So just holding those till the end. But Matt Wallner at the top, I had said earlier, I thought that would happen. I wanted that to happen. I am happy that it is happening. 23% of my lineups, 14% for the field. So again, it's not like he's a sneaky play or anything, but I have enough low-owned other guys that I can balance out Matt Wallner lineups with, and I just really like the spot for him. I like the hitter that he is. I like the batting order. I like the price. Everything looks good there. Love Stephen Kwan here. This is a pitcher or a hitter rather in previous years, that was always a good hitter, but he was kind of, for like lack of a better way of talking about him, a hitter that was better in real life than in DFS because he was a really good hitter. He doesn't strike out a lot. He gets on base, but he didn't hit for any power. He has made some adjustments to his swing this year. Still not hitting for a ton of power. 132 ISO compared to 121 last year. But he had intentionally, sort of made some adjustments, and we saw that especially in the first half. But he's also just not all that expensive. So for Cleveland, I do like him at the top of the order. A pretty good amount here. 4,700 is a pretty good price tag. Brent Rooker, 5,700, batting second. He's in a lot of my lineups. This is definitely one of the A's that I would want to be getting to. If you're stacking the A's and for some reason you're not playing Brent Rooker, you're probably kind of making a mistake. Obviously 5,700 is a very expensive price tag because, especially when you consider the opportunity cost in the outfield. But Brent Rooker is a really, really good hitter. He's got a ton of power. So yeah, if I'm going to the A's, I certainly want to be getting to Rooker. Cedric Mullins, not that cheap, but low owned. Hitting second, did get a lineup bump. Gives you stolen base upside, gives you, some power upside at least at low ownership. I think that's fine. JJ Bleday, same thing as Rooker, not in terms of talent, but just in terms of like, this is the middle of the order bat for Oakland. He is reasonably priced. If I'm playing these other guys that I already talked about, I would definitely hope I'm playing JJ Bleday. Anthony Santander, no ownership for him in Fenway. Along with Gunnar, this is a catalyst of the Orioles offense. I don't care if it's in O stacks. I don't care if it's mini stacks, one-offs, whatever it is. If I can find a way to pay for Santander at 5,800, that's great. And one way that I'm doing that, obviously, is Oakland. Another way is Minnesota. Cleveland's not that expensive overall either, but I think it's probably a lot of those cheaper stacks that are getting me to these Orioles that I want, Gunnar and Santander. It does also make me think that I'm probably mini stacking the O's predominantly because I didn't see a lot of Kobe Mayo showing up. I didn't see a lot of Jackson Holliday showing up. I didn't see James McCann popping. So I don't think I'm 5-man stacking as much as I'm 2-man stacking probably. 4% 2-man stacks, 3% 5-man. So I am getting to him a decent amount as 5-mans, 5% 3-mans. So I think mostly still, smaller stacks, which does make sense. And the guys that I'm getting to are the ones that I would want in those types of stacks. Like James McCann, for example, I don't really want showing up in like a 2-man because 1, he doesn't really correlate as strongly with middle of the order bats. And 2, the fewer guys from your stack that you have, the more you need those hitters to get the job done in terms of just like providing all of the offense, all of the work. And so obviously the shorter the stack, the more you just want to be prioritizing the highest upside hitters as opposed to like the best values, basically. The more volatility, the better. The shorter the stack is kind of. Jock Peterson, same thing, low owned, tons of power. Not a good spot, but he's relatively inexpensive at 4,200 too. Seth Brown, getting a bit more of him in the outfield. Yordan Alvarez, goes without saying that I'm happy with whatever I can get there. I don't care that it's lefty-lefty. JP Sears, against left-handed hitters this year, has held them to a 138 expected ISO, 24% strikeout percentage. He's been much better against lefties than righties, but Yordan Alvarez just hits everyone so well. 181 plate appearances against lefties this year, 254 expected ISO. Go back to last year, he has a 237 expected ISO in 354 plate appearances. Could not care less who Yordan Alvarez is facing pretty much ever. He's a good play if you can get to him. Corbin Carroll, same kind of thing. Has stolen base upside, like I mentioned before. We did get the Arizona lineup, it appears, and he is leading off. Trevor Larnach, batting cleanup, 3,200, looks pretty good. One thing I did want to check for this Minnesota stack. I'm not going to care too much because of how cheap they are and the power upside that the starters have. There is some platoon risk, but the Angels bullpen is, I think, favorable for these left-handed bats for Minnesota. They have three lefties in their bullpen. One of them, Jose Suarez, threw 49 pitches yesterday, so he's not pitching today, I would assume. And then they have two lefties, but they're both typically used in higher leverage situations. So that's not to say there's no chance that they come in like the sixth or seventh inning, but chances are they're saving those guys for later in the game, at least one of them. So it does make it a little bit more difficult for them to match up, especially when you consider, if you're still in like a 4-3 game by the eighth inning, you can kind of write that stack off anyway. 9 times out of 10, it's just not going to get there. And I don't really care that they're getting pinch hit for, which is kind of where I was going with this tangent. So I'm not overly concerned about Twins pinch hitting in this spot. I did want to look, though, because they are a team that in general will pinch hit pretty aggressively. So wanted to check that out. Ownership in the outfield that maybe I'm not getting to. Already, Schneeman's not in the lineup. We can ignore that one. Other than that, I'm getting mostly to the popular guys. Kyle Tucker's back for Houston. Same thing as Alvarez. Hits left-handed pitching very, very well. If you are getting to Houston, you should not be skipping over Kyle Tucker, just like you should not be skipping over Alvarez. Noel, a little below the field there. I mentioned before, he does have power upside against anybody. He is facing a pitcher that doesn't miss a lot of bats. But Cannon has, to his credit, been better at limiting damage to righties. So I'm not getting to as much Noel as the lefties, which is kind of exactly how I would like it. You do also have some defensive replacement risk with Noel. He is playing right field. He is not particularly good at that. So they're starting him against a righty. So I don't really care. I'm not worried as much about the pinch hit risk. I'm more concerned about, the Guardians are up like 7-2 in the seventh inning and they just take him out because they would rather not have a right fielder running in circles every time a fly ball gets hit out there. So that's a little bit of a concern there. But, still a relatively minor concern. Like if you like him and you have him in a lineup, I certainly wouldn't be taking him out for that reason. But did want to just, kind of mention that. So that gets through all of the positions. I'm going to run back and try and catch up on as many questions as I can from chat. Arcathelza said Oakland with no Butler is nasty. Yeah, I mean, it is. Like I would prefer Lawrence Butler be leading off instead of Jacob Wilson. You have a hell of a lot more upside, but you still have substantial upside from Rooker, Bleday, Langeliers. One benefit actually though to Butler not being in the lineup, again, I'd prefer he be in there, but one thing that usually sucks about stacking Oakland is that three of the guys you really want to get to at least are outfielders with Bleday, Rooker, and Butler, and then like sometimes you have Andujar in there too. Outfield's a really easy position to fill with one-offs. Like there's so many just stud outfielders that have 2 home run upside that if you could like draw up the perfect stack, it would actually be a stack that has a power hitting catcher, a power hitting second baseman, and like a power hitting third baseman or shortstop. Because catcher is a shitty position to try and find one-offs at. Second base isn't great. Third base usually isn't that great. There's always a few. Shortstop, same thing. Like you can pay all the way up and you get some of the best hitters in baseball. But if you can't afford to do that, it's hard to find high upside shortstops. So like ideally, the perfect stack leaves outfield spots open. So that is actually one benefit to this Oakland stack today, even though it is missing Butler, is that it gives you like a value shortstop leading off in Wilson. The opportunity cost there isn't quite as much as giving up that outfield spot. And then it allows me to play Alvarez, Tucker, Santander, Ohtani, who I wasn't really getting to, but you get the point. Aaron Judge, Soto, whoever you want as one of these outfield guys. Whereas they don't really exist at like catcher or something where you have Langeliers in this stack. So that is, again, I would prefer Butler being there, but that is kind of a slight positive to the way that Oakland's lineup is constructed today. Spurious News said, any thoughts on the best pitchers for single entry? Arrighetti and Lopez. Also, if you wanted to go the A's, then obviously not Arrighetti. I would just go down to whoever was after him. Savali probably. Yeah, like I would say these are probably the top 3 in single entry. You could throw Gallen in there too. Bassett is probably somebody that I'm getting to in large field that I probably wouldn't want in single entry. For the most part, teams that I play in large field, the teams that I play the most in large field show up pretty well for me in small field too. There are some exceptions, but generally that's the case. It's more so the like middle of the road teams that I get to in large field that are like 5% owned that I'm playing 10% that get kind of squeezed out in single entry. No love for Houston. I think I touched on that. I have some Houston. They're kind of not showing up a ton. Talked about Root. Is Darvish on a pitch count, and how do you like Payante? Darvish, I assume, is on a pitch count. He threw 63 pitches last time out. He had thrown like 65 in a simulated game. He was sort of struggling last time out, so that may have played a role. But I do expect that he's not. At the very least, he's limited. It's just a matter of exactly how much. There was a question somewhere that I just saw, and then immediately. Oh, the second part of that. How do I like Payante? I never like Payante. He's good at limiting power. He's not very good at getting strikeouts. So I generally don't really get to him. I'm not getting to him today. If you wanted to tell me that you like him because he's playing the Reds, that is perfectly fine. I don't actually know his salary off the top of my head. I just know that I wasn't getting to him. 7,700 is just like it's a tough sell because of the lack of strikeout upside. I have him projected for like the same number of points as the Giants pitcher who's 4K that I'm not getting to. So there's that. He is good at limiting power though. It's just somebody that I don't really play too much in DFS. Choke Hold'em said any dinger takes at long odds. I couldn't tell you what the home run odds are, so I don't know. Like, I don't know whose odds are good. I can quickly try and just guess a home run that isn't like Jose Ramirez or Bobby Witt or something. I think there was something. I mean, I like Josh Naylor. I have no idea what his odds are, but I do really, really, really like the matchup for him. Josh Naylor, any of the good Mets lefties, Lindor, Nimmo, would probably be at the top of my list. But I do like Josh Naylor a ton. So, like I said, I have no idea what his odds are, but obviously he's not in the same tier as like Ohtani and those guys, so I don't feel like I'm cheating. How is Eovaldi at holding runners? Not very good, which is one reason that I do like Arizona a little bit. MJ Melendez batting fourth on the road seems good. Yeah, I like that matchup for him against Stroman too. Right-handed pitcher, doesn't miss a lot of bats in Yankee Stadium. I do like that for Melendez. Talked about Yamamoto and Imanaga. Getting to St. Louis and KC. Yeah, KC's. I think I mentioned it with Perez, but like if you're getting to Bobby Witt, you're getting to Melendez, you're getting to Salvador Perez. Obviously, that is all fine. They just are getting squeezed out a little bit. For me, which team would I stack for single entry, Baltimore or the Dodgers? I would. My guess is it would be neither one, but I would probably go Baltimore first, just because that is the team that I seem to be getting to more than the Dodgers. Best mini / secondary stack for large field. I'm probably going to say Oakland. Actually, so for me, it looks like for secondary stacks, Cleveland, Minnesota, Oakland is showing up as a 3-man too. But it does seem like I'm kind of using, not exclusively, but using the more popular stacks that I do like Cleveland and Minnesota as mini stacks, and then 5-man stacking a lower owned team like Oakland. So I guess that would be my answer is one of these actually highly projected teams like Cleveland. I like a lot. Witt Jr. or Gunnar today. Can't go wrong with either one. I have more Gunnar than Witt. I think Witt's projected for more ownership than Gunnar. It's kind of just a situation where they have the same range of outcomes. And so why not just take the lower owned one? Chunk to Do said, are you maxing out the 111 today? I don't have that cash flow or any bullets, but I'd like to root for someone. I have 10 in there. Yeah, I'm not maxing it, but I am playing it. I would like the 100K going into NFL weekend. That would be enjoyable. Any Tyreek takes? I mean, that video was like exactly what I thought it was going to be, basically. Yeah, Alvarez, terrible BVP versus Sears. I take back everything that I said about liking Alvarez. Not sure how I feel about Eovaldi on FanDuel. I haven't run anything. I don't even know what his salary is. I probably don't really like him that much because you're only rostering one pitcher, and he does have a tough strikeout matchup against Arizona. So, like, I would assume I'd just rather be playing some combination of like Lopez or Arrighetti or Savali or something, but can't say that with a ton of confidence. Thoughts on playing both Savali and Lively in a DK single entry small field? I think it's fine. Savali is one of the best value pitchers on the slate at his like $6,300 price tag, and there's nothing wrong with Lively against the White Sox. I don't have any issues with that at all. Opinion on Rhett Lauder. I don't have one as far as like a pitcher goes overall. As far as on this slate, I have a hard time seeing it. Cardinals are a relatively difficult team to strike out. He is making his fourth total start above AA. He doesn't project to be a particularly good strikeout guy. I do think I bet under like 3.5 strikeouts on him earlier too. So I don't really see it. I'm not getting to him. Toronto against Peterson. Yeah, Toronto's another one of those offenses that like when they're low owned, I don't think you're ever wrong for getting to them, especially in Rogers Center where it does play up right-handed power. Peterson's not a bad pitcher, but you know, kind of like I was saying with like the Orioles against Crawford, there's enough talent there and upside, or like the Diamondbacks against Evaldi are a good example too. Toronto is not going to succeed that high or like with a huge frequency against Peterson, but when they do, it still looks really good, especially in that park because of the right-handed power factor and the fact that home runs. These guys can all hit home runs. Only a 154 expected ISO to righties for Peterson this year. 162 if you go back to last year. The most likely outcome certainly isn't that Toronto does well, but because of that, they're not going to be that popular and the ceiling is high. So absolutely one of those teams that I don't have, but if Toronto's the team you need today, it's not like it would shock me. 5% of my lineups total. 5-man stacks. I have 4 out of 150 in this set. So yeah, you can throw them in with like a bunch of other teams on this slate where it's just like, yeah, they have good hitters. I'll take my chances. The matchup's not great, but it's also not like he's an ace, so I think it's perfectly fine. Yeah, so that caught up on all the questions. Thanks again for checking out the show. Don't forget to hit the thumbs up, subscribe to the links in the description as well, Endgame Syndicate and my NFL Dub Club in there. If you subscribe to Endgame Syndicate, you don't need to subscribe to the Dub Club. Endgame Syndicate gets all of my NFL content and MLB content included with the membership over there. So sign up for that. Check it out. Really good stuff. Good videos from Utica, Nerdy Tanner, Brick75, and myself talking about intermediate DFS strategy and advanced DFS strategy. Kind of no matter how you approach DFS, we should be able to make you better. You also get Discord access. We're all in there to answer questions, strategy-wise, just helping you improve. So excited about that, and sign up, check that out. And also, if for whatever reason it doesn't make sense for you right now, you can get access to my content through Dub Club using the link in the description below for the NFL Dub Club. So thanks again for checking out the show, and I will be back here again tomorrow doing the same show at the same time. Thanks again.